Welcome everybody to a very depleted committee this morning, but I'm sure we'll be okay. We've got apologies. I've just had apologies from ASFAR. Could you like to read out the rest of the apologies, please, Mandy?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Hewitt, Hayden and Sylvester Hall.
I know Councillor Ward has a struggle with working, so the fact he's not here, I think we can record his apologies because he did tell me he'd try to get here, but looks like he's failed as well. Right, thank you for that. So we'll move on to declarations of interest. No. Minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of September 2021. Can someone approve those as a correct record, please? Thank you, Anne.
Could I just ask a quick question on those? The number 94, we haven't received that yet. Is that coming in the minutes?
Yes, that will be circulated. It was going to be Rob Salmon to provide that information to the committee, but unfortunately Rob's not able to make the meeting today, so I'll ensure that that gets distributed.
Thank you. And I approve the minutes.
Thank you, Caroline. So we'll move on to the first report, agenda item 4. That's the LGSCO annual report, which I think Mr. Traywell can tell us what that means. John, over to you, John, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the annual report from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. They're the people that look in those complaints where people are not satisfied, having been through the council's own complaints procedure. It's a report that comes every year. It is basically sort of setting out a series of statistics in terms of complaint numbers and so on. And I guess that's helpful in terms of it helps you to see whether things have got worse or better than previous years. In our case, I think if you look at the actual Appendix 3, the breakdown of the complaints in comparison with previous years, you'll see that this year the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman carried out slightly fewer investigations than in previous years, 40 instead of 44 last year and 50 the year before, but it upheld slightly more of those, so 37 as opposed to 26 and 36 in the preceding 2 years. Doesn't feel like there's a huge sort of significant change over that sort of 3-year period. The statistics show we're getting the same number of complaints roughly as we always have. I suppose the reason why it might be slightly different in the past year is there were lots of individual complaints around Purton transport that might have slightly skewed the figures, but overall I don't think this report shows anything that the committee should be particularly concerned about.
Are there any questions to John from members? Caroline?
Can I just ask that this goes to somewhere else next time? It's the first time it's come to Audit and Standards, but there's not enough information in it for us to do anything with it. So I don't think it's the right place for it. I don't know if other people agree.
I think having looked at the report, John, I think I have to sort of agree with Caroline because it's such a broad-based report. There's no actual information in that report. It's just saying, you know, we've had a few more complaints and the pandemic's probably the reason for it, but it doesn't give you any depth or of what's actually, if any major faults anywhere in the authority or anything. But that's my personal opinion. I don't know what other members feel. Right, John, unless you've got anything else to add, John, you can move on.
Well, Chair, we'll take that suggestion away that we find somewhere else for this to go in future years, and we'll have a look at that, and we'll see whether we can find somewhere else for it to go.
Thank you very much, John. Much appreciated. I think you can still stay online, though, because I think you were doing agenda item 5, John, which is the revised procurement regulations, changes to the Constitution. So you're back in the hot seat, John.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll also see that Paul Timmins, who's the person who prepared the report, is with me to help answer any questions that you might have in relation to this report. The report is about making some changes to the rules around how we procure goods and services as an organisation, and changes the procurement regulations. The changes are fairly minor. I think most of them are about bringing the regulations a little bit more up to date in some respects. I think the one significant change that I want to draw to your attention is that in relation to the band approvals. So this is the level at which procurement decisions are made by officers within the authority. Obviously, the major decisions remain made by Cabinet. That's where we're procuring goods and services to a value of in excess of £2 million. And then for those decisions that are between £500,000 and £2 million, a senior leadership team member will make those decisions. And then below that, we're suggesting a slight change, and this is a sort of significant point for you, so that we're now suggesting that Band B officers are able to take decisions up to £500,000 rather than up to the level of £189,330 as it was previously. And then also that Band C officers can make decisions to a value of up to £100,000, which again is an increase. Just to sort of help you understand who the Band B officers are, Band B officers are those officers that report into senior leadership team members. So they're very senior officers in the organisation. There are probably around 25 Band B officers in the organisation. And then Band C officers are those officers that report to Band B officers. So I hope you'll appreciate these are very senior officers within the organisation. They often have very, very large budgets, in the millions, in some cases in the tens of millions of pounds. And I think our view is it makes sense that they can make decisions that are within their budget, provided they're not in excess of £500,000 or £100,000 in the case of Band C officers. I don't have anything further to add at this stage, but very happy to take questions, which I may well have to get Paul to answer if it gets into the real detail of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that report, John. Before I pass it open to members, from my perspective, I would just compare, this change. How do we compare to other county councils in the country with this sort of ratio of 2 million council cabinet, 500,000 council executive officer delegated decision? Is that a normal amount for what we consider to be appropriate for a county council? Because I've no idea personally. So if you can perhaps enlighten me, or if you don't know, could find out.
Yeah, I think obviously authorities do it differently. I don't think we're too far out of step in terms of the £2 million limit for county councils. Overall, we spend, it depends on how you count it, but around about £500 million a year. And on some measures about £1 billion a year. So these are, we are a very significant authority. We have massive budgets. We have about 1,200 contracts. About £450 million of our money is on these contracts. So I don't think we're too far out of step. I couldn't honestly say, though, in terms of those different bands. That's something I can look at, and we can get some information to you. This would go on to full council, so we'll certainly have that information for you before it goes to full council, so that you do have the answer to that question.
Thank you, John. Any members got any questions? Bernard?
Thank you, Chair. Could you just outline for me how the CMA, Competition Markets Authority, fits into this policy? I mean, they're there to ensure that we don't become ripped off, as it were. There's no mention of the CMA in this document. Is it relevant to the piece of work that we're talking about? Thank you.
Not really, I don't think, Councillor. The procurement regs, I think if you read through them, are pretty much self-contained in terms of ensuring that there is a sensible procurement process in place to make sure that we do not get ripped off, as you've outlined. They do require competition for nearly all our procurements. They require a fairly open competition in many cases. And I think the only occasions when we don't really go out to competition is where we're able to procure things off a framework where that framework itself has been out to competition. We do have safeguards in place to make sure that decisions aren't just taken by one officer. So whilst a decision might be taken by me as a Band A officer, before I take that decision, there are various levels of people within the authority, the professionals in the authority have looked over that, and there is usually either 2 or 3 other people that have recommended that to me before I make a decision. So there are kind of safeguards in place, plus the process that we have in place that should make sure that we're not ripped off. But no, the Competition Markets Authority doesn't have any great relevance. Sometimes you do get things where there are cartels operating in markets and that kind of thing. That's when we do need help from the government to deal with those kind of issues. But that is sort of fairly rare for us, to be honest.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'm just looking at this and thinking to myself, these Band B officers, how long have they been working for the council? Have they just come in? Have they been here 2 years or 3 years? And have they been vetted to be able to spend this sort of money on our behalf?
I think it depends. Obviously, lots of our officers have been here for quite some time, but officers become a Band B officer. It depends on their grade within the authority as to whether they're Band B or not. So they could be newer officers on occasion. But all our officers go through a rigorous selection process. You don't get a job in the county council without having to go through a rigorous selection process. And that's really important because some of these Band B officers can have budgets, as I say, in the many millions of pounds. So we have to be very careful when we appoint those to make sure they are suitable to manage that level of responsibility in the organisation. There's not then an additional check before they could exercise their powers under the procurement regulations. The real checks are within that recruitment process. But yes, every one of those officers has been through a rigorous selection process.
Thank you, Chair. I've got no objection to the changes, but my question is perhaps more for Paul. Do we, every year, do we have a summary of, and particularly in services as opposed to products, do we have a summary of our service contracts and how well they've done, so that we as councillors can have a better understanding of how well things are managed? Because to me, if you let a contract for 5 years to, I don't know, let's pick on somebody like Amy for highways, how well is it going each year? And do we have that information brought to us? Thank you.
You picked a very good topic there with Amy, Graham. That's a minefield.
Yeah, if I can pick that up, we've got a contract register of all the contracts over £25,000 that the council operate and manage. Is there a dashboard, which I think actually sounds like a very good idea? Is there a dashboard of all the answers to how everything's going all in one place? I don't think there is. All right, but I certainly think each directorate clearly manages its own way forward in its own contracts and escalates the good news and bad news through its own channels. Up to clearly SLT if it needs to go that far. But I don't think there's a central dashboard, which I think is probably where you're aiming the question. I think it's a really good point. Overall, the spectrum of what's going on in our contracts. So that's something I'll be able to take away and have a look to see if we can develop. But certainly we have visibility of our contracts, which is the contracts register.
Go on, Graham, if you want to come back.
Thank you.
I think that was a very good point, Graham. So I think it's well worth your note. Thank you for that question. Any other questions, Carolyn?
I just wanted to thank you for this report. Actually, I find it very detailed, which is nice to see, and do understand that procurement contracts and things do run. Obviously, £500,000 is very much a minimum at the county now. So, but I'm glad this has supplied me with assurance that it's the right thing to do. But could you just, for the record, assure us that you think this is definitely the right thing to do.
Thank you, Caroline. I think, are we happy to accept the recommendation then?
Oh, you didn't assure me. No,
Oh,
I like his assurance.
He's after your assurance, please, Paul, I think.
I'm happy with it. I mean, it's a day-to-day operations from our perspective. So there's a few changes in there, which are not, not just the band changes. So the things that we see on the ground to make things a bit more efficient in the process that makes sense. But clearly the bands itself, probably the biggest change. There's always the, there's always the option if a band B doesn't want to do the approval of their new level, they can certainly revert it back to the band A. So we're not putting people into corners with this. So yes, I think it's the right thing to do.
I can say, Paul, if Caroline's happy with the report, you've done very well because she is very thorough.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your report, and I think we're happy to accept the recommendation, so we'll move on to agenda item 6.
Thank you, Chairman.
Which isn't Rob Salmon, it's our Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman. The report in front of you today is the looking at the review of the Council's financial regulations. These were last updated and approved by the Committee in Full Council in 2018. The major changes that have taken place to this iteration of the regulations are highlighted within the document in yellow and then summarised at paragraph 5 on page 50 of your report pack. The main areas of change relate to Financial Regulation B, which has been updated to include specific reference to the requirement to obtain Cabinet approval where the Council wishes to undertake the formal role of accountable body for a partnership, and subsequently that partnership will follow the SCC financial policies and practices as standard practice. So that's been included within Financial Regulation B. At Financial Regulation E, we've updated the information regarding the arrangements for the receipt and payment of invoices electronically. That's again moving with the times, and the order approval limits have been amended in line with the procurement regulations that have been brought to you this morning. In addition, an additional strengthening of the purchase card guidance regarding purchasing of food and drink for staff social events is prohibited, and that's very explicit now within the financial regulations rather than implicit as it was previously. Financial Regulation F has been updated to include reference to direct debit being the preferred method of payment for those services that the Council provides frequently, mainly involving payments for adult social care. That's an efficiency process and also to assist individuals in making that payment process easier. And Financial Regulation H, the section on the disposal of supplies has been updated. Previously, we did operate a practice that allowed us to sell surplus assets through the eBay procedure, and we'd worked with our colleagues within procurement to design that process. Regulation has changed, so that option is now not available. So what we've put in place now is that where individuals have got assets that are surplus and the way to dispose of them, they'll be done by seeking the advice of a procurement advisor to advise of the best way to dispose of those assets, which means that the Council obtains best value for money in that disposal process. So they are the key highlights within the revised financial regulations. It is recommended as part of this report that, again, the revisions are approved and that they're put forward to full council for approval to be included within the Constitution. I'm happy to take any questions regarding the report.
Thank you, Melissa, for the report. It's a very extensive report, I must say. Any questions from members, please? No, we're all very happy that you're doing a good job, Lisa, so I think we can approve that recommendation, which will be going to Cabinet. So thank you, members, for that. So this is, brings us on to agenda item 7. This is Debbie's role here now for the National Fraud Initiative. Would you like to update us, please, Debbie?
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you today is the regular NFI update report, providing members with an update on the exercise that commenced back in October 2020. For those members that don't already know, this is a biennial exercise, data matching exercise. There's over 1,000 organisations from the public and private sector that submit data to the Cabinet Office, and that data is matched to highlight potential fraud and error. The Council submitted various data sets back in October 2020 relating to payroll, pensions, creditors, blue badge holders and travel passes, and the Cabinet Office have a database and various formula that they run and software, and various matches are returned back to us in January and February. So Appendix 1, which is on page 117 of your pack, provides you with all the details of the various matches that we have received back, and as part of this process, the County Fraud Manager will undertake some sampling and select our own sample from which to do our own testing. At the moment, we've identified duplicate creditor payments as 3 of those, amounting to just over £2,000. We have received back £989 already, and we are in the process of recovering a further 1,298. Those figures are detailed on in paragraph 11 on page 114 of your pack. Chair, I don't propose to go through the whole of Appendix 1 because there's quite a lot of detail there, but I'm happy to take any questions in relation to any of the types of data matches that we get involved in.
Yeah, from my perspective, Debbie, I think the fact that it's only £2,000 out of the vast reserves of monies that are spent is it's very pleasing that you picked this up, and I think it'd be interesting to note for the members that we do get this £1,300 back, so if you can just update us when that comes back in, that'd be great from my perspective. Any questions from members, please?
Chair, sorry, could I just say that as part of the outturn, which will come back to the committee in July 21, there'll be an update in terms of what this actual exercise has yielded anyway.
Smashing. That brings us on to the forward plan. That's Lisa, back over to you, agenda item 8.
Thank you, Chairman. This particular report really is designed to give members the heads up and detail regarding future agenda items. You will see on the items that are identified for the 14th of December, it's quite a large, potentially a large committee meeting, mainly due to the accounts, statement of accounts that will be brought for the organisation and also for the pension fund that will be brought to the committee for approval in December. There are a number of additional reports that the committee has requested that are brought back to this particular committee, and they have been incorporated in future meetings, namely the 22nd of February and also the 16th of April. So that the forward plan constitutes the work programme of the Audit and Standards Committee, and happy to take any questions regarding the content.
Any questions? No, I don't think that's difficult one, to question at this stage.
Yeah, is there a way to shrink this down in any way? They all seem very large meetings.
We can have a look at that, Vice Chair. The other alternative is to potentially explore a further additional meeting, but I'll look to my colleagues within Democratic Services to see whether or not that's actually possible in order to be able to manage the agenda size. We'll take that away and have a further look at that. Thank you.
I do think December meeting is a real humdinger from a printing art perspective. Goodness knows how many pages it's going to be, so good luck on printing it. If you decide to print it out, good luck. So it's a huge agenda, I'm afraid. Right, I've got to exclude the public now, so if we'd like to close down the recording. I'd like to say that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended of the Local Government Act 1972 as indicated below. Carry on, shall we?
Chair, can we just wait for the webcast to finish? It takes